In every room, every negotiation, every conflict, every crisis, there is usually one person who does not seem affected. While everyone else reacts, they respond. While others escalate, they de-escalate. While emotions flood the room, they observe. Most people assume this person is cold, unfeeling, disengaged. They are almost always wrong. The research tells a different story entirely. In 1995, psychologist Daniel Goleman published a book that would challenge everything we thought we knew about intelligence. He argued that the emotional skills most people dismiss as soft, empathy, self-regulation, social awareness, were not only learnable, they were more predictive of lifelong success than IQ. Almost 30 years later, neuroscience has proved him right. Today, we are going to break down what emotional intelligence actually is, why it is the most underleveraged power most people carry, and, crucially, how 3 of history's most influential people mastered it to change the world. Goleman identified 4 core components of emotional intelligence. First, self-awareness, the ability to accurately recognize your own emotions as they happen and understand how they influence your thinking and decisions. Second, self-regulation, the ability to manage and redirect disruptive emotions and impulses, and to think before acting. Third, empathy, the ability to understand the emotional experience of others, even without being told. And fourth, social skill, the ability to build genuine relationships, navigate conflict, and influence people without dominance or manipulation. Notice what these 4 things have in common. They are all about the relationship between emotion and action. Not suppressing emotion, never that, but creating a space between what you feel and what you do. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, called this space the last of human freedoms. The freedom to choose your response. Emotional intelligence is the practice of inhabiting that space, deliberately, under pressure. In 1861, Abraham Lincoln appointed to his cabinet the men who had humiliated him during his presidential campaign, men who called him a backwoods fool, men who openly despised him. His advisors thought he had lost his mind. Lincoln's explanation was simple. He needed the best minds in the country for what was coming, and he could not afford to let his ego determine who those men were. This is emotional intelligence operating at the highest possible level. Lincoln was, by most accounts, a man of deep feeling. He suffered profound depression throughout his life, what he called the hypo. He grieved heavily, loved intensely, and felt the weight of the war in ways that broke lesser people completely. But between his feelings and his decisions, there was always that space. When generals failed him, he did not fire them in anger. He studied why they had failed. When his cabinet members clashed viciously, he managed each relationship individually with patience that bordered on supernatural. Historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, who wrote the definitive study of Lincoln's cabinet, found that his emotional skill was inseparable from his political genius. He could make men who hated each other work together because he understood what each of them needed, and because they sensed he was never reacting. He was always deciding. The mechanism behind emotional intelligence is neurological, not philosophical, and understanding it makes the whole concept click into place. At the center of your brain's emotional system sits the amygdala, a small, ancient structure that functions as your threat detection alarm. When you perceive a threat, social, physical, professional, your amygdala fires. It triggers a cascade of cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate climbs. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thought, nuance, and long-term consequences, goes offline. Goleman called this the amygdala hijack. It's why intelligent people say things they regret in arguments. Why skilled professionals freeze during high-stakes presentations. Why reasonable people make terrible decisions under pressure. Their amygdala fired, and their reasoning brains stepped aside. Emotional intelligence does not prevent the amygdala from firing. It builds a delay. Through deliberate practice, mindfulness, self-reflection, exposure to difficult emotions without reacting to them, You extend the window between the emotional trigger and the behavioral response. Research from Harvard Medical School shows that regular practices of mindful self-awareness literally rewire the amygdala over time, making it less reactive and the prefrontal cortex more dominant. You are not suppressing emotion. You are training your brain to give reason a chance to speak. Emotional intelligence does not prevent the amygdala from firing. It builds a delay. Through deliberate practice, mindfulness, self-reflection, exposure to difficult emotions without reacting to them, you extend the window between the emotional trigger and the behavioral response. Research from Harvard Medical School shows that regular practices of mindful self-awareness literally rewire the amygdala over time, making it less reactive and the prefrontal cortex more dominant. You are not suppressing emotion. You are training your brain to give reason a chance to speak. If you want to understand emotional intelligence at its absolute limit, look at Nelson Mandela. He spent 27 years imprisoned on Robben Island for fighting the apartheid system that was destroying his country and his people. When he was released in 1990, the world expected a man broken by rage. What emerged was someone whom observers described as the most emotionally composed leader they had ever encountered. Mandela was asked, years later, how he felt walking out of that prison. He described a surge of anger, then a deliberate choice. He understood something profound. If he walked out of that prison hating, he would still be their prisoner. His body would be free. His mind would not. The composure he chose was not weakness. It was the most powerful strategic decision of the 20th century. That choice of emotional regulation enabled a peaceful transition from apartheid, something that almost everyone believed would end in civil war. Mandela's emotional intelligence did not make the injustice smaller. It made him bigger than the injustice. And that size, that calm, unbreakable presence, changed a nation. Emotional intelligence is not a fixed trait. Neuroscience is clear on this. It is a trainable capacity, and the training is surprisingly specific. The first practice is the daily emotional audit. Every evening, take 5 minutes to name what you felt during the day. Not what happened, what you felt. Research from Yale psychologist Mark Brackett shows that people who can accurately label their emotions are significantly better at regulating them. The label creates distance. Distance creates choice. The second practice is the pause protocol. Choose one situation in your life where you regularly react in ways you later regret. A particular colleague, a specific type of criticism, a trigger in a relationship. The next time that situation arises, count silently to 10 before responding. Breathe twice. This is not suppression, it is the mechanical creation of Frankel's space. 1 second of delay gives your prefrontal cortex time to re-engage. The third practice is deliberate empathy, which is different from natural empathy. Before your next difficult conversation, spend 2 minutes imagining the other person's internal experience. Not to excuse them, to understand them well enough to communicate effectively. Mandela studied the psychology of his captors from inside his cell. He wanted to understand them, because he knew that understanding people is how you change them. None of this is complicated. All of it requires commitment. Begin with one practice, choose the audit, and watch what happens. IQ gets you in the room. Emotional intelligence determines what you do once you're there. The most powerful people in history were not always the smartest in the room. They were not always the strongest, or the most connected, or the most privileged. They were almost always the most emotionally regulated. They saw clearly when others were flooded. They chose their responses when others simply reacted. They built relationships that ordinary ambition could not, because they were genuinely interested in understanding the people around them. Lincoln, Mandela, and dozens of leaders across every century and culture who understood that the mastery of self is the foundation of all other mastery. This is not soft skill. This is the skill, and it is available to you, starting with one journal entry, one pause, one deliberate attempt to understand before being understood. If this opens something for you, subscribe, because every week we break down the most powerful ideas from history's greatest minds and show you exactly how to use them. Share this with someone who you think is already quietly emotionally intelligent and hasn't realized yet just how rare that is. The Stoic Daily Journal in the description is where I'd start building this practice. Link below.